Yeah, thank you for that, Winter. And I'm going to hand it over to Stephen in 1 second, but I want to first call out all of the beautiful people on this call on Juneteenth weekend. I see you all. I see so many friends. We're family on this call. Before we got started, before you all joined, I'm excited for the panel. One of the things we talked about is that, let's be real here. You know, the most inclusive thing that we have in this country is racism. It asks so few questions and it includes so many, that in a regressive taxation structure. So you can't tell me we can't figure out how to be inclusive. It's all in sometimes the negative ways. So with that, I'm just gonna hand it over to Stephen. He's gonna give space for the presenters. We're gonna have some questions. We're gonna have some dialogue. You know, we got some heavy hitters on here. We're happy to see your smiling faces. It's about to get real. So Stephen.
Thanks, Q. I'm honored to be part of this conversation today. I'm a lover of history. Juneteenth was started in 1866 in Galveston, Texas. And I want us all to kind of try and take ourselves back to that moment in time where you were newly freed folks and the opportunities you had ahead of you were very different than the opportunities you had behind you. And the playbook that you used before to survive and try and keep families together and build community, we're going to look very different moving forward. And so, you know, as I think about that moment in time, I think about a big word for me, and it aligns with, I think, the conversation we're going to have today is the power of and, right? Historically, for our community, we've had to settle for crumbs, right? It's been a fight for, you know, are we going to do this? Or are we going to do that? Are we going to do this? What if we inserted the word and? And I think that's the opportunity that those folks in Galveston had for the very first time, right? We can do this and we can do this. We can do this and we can do this. And so as we go into this conversation today, think about it from the standpoint of abundance. And I think for Black folks in the United States, the first opportunity to have this even enter your mind of opportunity of abundance was when you were finally free, right? And so that to me is what Juneteenth is really about. It's a new beginning and a new mindset for how we can create community and where we can do it. And I always say, you know, places are where you go. Spaces are things that people make, right? And we can make spaces all over Portland, all over the state of Oregon. And as we go into this conversation today with these amazing panelists, have that word "and" in the back of your mind as we talk about these topics.
Stephen, really quick, in my screen, I see someone, I got to shout her out, Mama Avell Gordley, looking beautiful on the call. I can't move forward without doing that. You touched my heart. You touched so many for us. Sorry about that, Stephen. I can't go.
There's no sorry there. You know,
okay.
We stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And to have one of your giants right here in our presence, it speaks to, you know, why the Cupids and I go so hard, right? Because of what Miss Avell had to do. And so to even try and do it justice means we have to go really, really, really hard. We can't go and try and do the same thing. So no, I appreciate you calling her out, as you should have. So as we go into next, I want our panelists to take 2 to 3 minutes to introduce themselves, but also, you know, center us on what they're feeling today as we go into this conversation. And I'm going to start with Miss Rakaya Adams as we go into this. So Rakaya.
Yeah, my heart is both heavy and open. I see a lot of familiar faces on the call, people I played in the sandbox with in Albina. I'm a homegirl from Portland, a 4th generation Portlander. My great-grandmother and great-grandfather are buried at Willamette National Cemetery. We have a lot of memory about this place and a lot of commitment to it. When my great-grandmother moved my family here from Louisiana, she settled in Lower Albina in an attic apartment. She looked across the river to the city and wrote in her Bible, "Dear God, I hope I made the right choice in bringing my family to this place." And 4 generations later, here we are having this conversation about building a beloved community. So to be clear, I want to just frame everything that I say today. I am in service to her search for freedom, safety, and beauty. My voice is her voice. It just took 70 years to be loud enough, to be audible. But these words, these feeling, this passion has always been there. And we are a part of the arc that is being bent toward justice. It will not bend itself. So now I'm a bossy middle-aged lady, 4 generations in from Portland, with deep love for you crazy people and your naked bike rides and your cats on your shoulder and all of the things that are Portland and all the things that are Black Portland. I'm in deep love with you. And things that are loved are corrected, they're improved, they're invested in. I'm that lady now. That's all I got to say.
Awesome. Thank you, Rakaya. Commissioner Hardesty, would you go next, please, ma'am?
Happy to. Good morning, and good morning, Senator Gordley. Senator Gordley is the single individual that is the reason why I ever thought that I had what it took to run and serve in public office. And one day I'll tell you about how I ended up replacing her in the state legislature, because prior to that, being a Black woman, running and serving in public office was never, ever something that was on my possibility list. I will tell you, I do not take my role lightly as the first African-American woman to have the privilege to serve on the Portland City Council. And every single day, I see how being that first is interpreted and perceived by folks who also never expected to have a Black woman sitting on the City Council. I will say that I am so privileged to be part of this panel today. I'm really thrilled about the conversation that we're gonna have, because I think we are at a pivotal moment where pivotal decisions must be made. And the question is, will we come out of this pandemic moving back into the status quo like some of us want us to do, to just flip the switch and go back to life as normal? Or will we be brave and courageous and visionary about what the potential is for us to be building for the kind of future that is racially just and climately resilient? That's what I'm working towards. And I think our conversation today is a huge part of that. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Blumenauer, please.
Thank you. And I can't think of a more appropriate date for us to have this conversation than Juneteenth. You know, it's interesting. People talk about the paralysis in Washington, D.C. and the loggerheads and hard to get stuff done. That holiday was declared in about 14 and a half minutes. The time was right. There was a lot of very hard work that had been done for years, but all of a sudden the pieces came together. And everybody was caught flat-footed. Today's, there was a holiday Friday, and the post office and the congressional offices, the federal government wasn't ready. I'm glad that there was that urgency and maybe a little dysfunction. It's kind of exciting that when time is ripe, things can happen. And I think this conversation is taking place at a time when the time is right. I've spent a lifetime working in and around our physical infrastructure in Portland, land use planning, sewers, light rail, streetcar, bicycles. But the element that was missing from our work with livability and visionary planning is we've never really dealt with the racial inequities that defined our community. The fact that veterans returning from World War II couldn't buy a house in Laurelhurst. And the systematic exclusion of Black Oregonians from the escalator of wealth, home ownership, has had lingering effects to this day. We moved forward in a number of areas, but as I mentioned, the thing that we didn't really focus on dealt with the hole in the heart of the city. And that is where the vibrant Albina community used to be, and the people who paid the price, and the infrastructure decisions, and it wasn't just highways, the Coliseum and others, that were made without regard to the people who lived there, their needs and their opportunities. I'm excited that we're turning a corner. I'm excited that Albina Vision helps us recapture a notion of our heritage. And it's not just Black Oregonians, it's the rest of us who were denied the vitality of that community that would have further enriched our lives. Awareness has been reached, has been raised. People are organizing. The Albina Vision, I think, embodies it. And we have a federal administration that is committed to an inclusive, low carbon future that speaks to those problems. There is a specific provision in the president's infrastructure plan that calls for reconnecting communities. That provision has Albina Vision written all over it. And if we're able to get our act together and move forward, I am confident that there will be an opportunity for us to have our efforts supplemented by federal resources. And it's only appropriate because federal resources drove the problems in the first place. Urban renewal, the I-5 freeway that was dropped down without regard to the community. So we're coming full cycle. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this conversation. I am excited about what I've heard so far and looking forward to what comes out of our conversation today and beyond.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. You know, so many great things that you said there. One of the things I'm sure we've all seen, all the articles and pieces coming out about the 100-year centennial of the Tulsa Race Massacre. One of the things that you probably didn't hear about was that those folks started building that community again the following day. And within a couple of years, they were back up and running, hundreds of Black businesses and an amazing Black community. What ultimately ended up taking them out was not the bombs dropped from planes or the bullets. It was urban renewal. It was highways. And I think about, you know, part of why this is so important is, you know, you can't write a check or do a program to get away from never having reconciliation. And I think that's something that Rakai has been really great about always bringing up, is that, you know, there's not a big enough budget to go and create trust. And I think that, you know, part of this project and many others is baking in and making a priority around building trust and reconciliation and able to move forward. So our fourth panelist is going to be joining us shortly, but we do have a video from Mr. Lou Frederick right now. So I believe Alexander's going to play that video for us.
Hello there.
Thanks, Stephen.
I'm sorry to miss the initial
Open
part of this
Signal, our
event,
AV
but I'm
production
hosting a
folks are going
town
to,
hall with my
cue
constituents
that up.
right now online.
So just
Hope to
give
join you
them a
soon.
moment and they'll be playing that.
Today is an important day in our history, and we now have another reason to celebrate. Juneteenth has been established now as a federal holiday. In Oregon, we passed House Bill 2168, which makes Juneteenth a legal holiday here. HB 2168 recognizes that this important day in history is worth remembering and celebrating. Juneteenth is our country's second Independence Day, one that celebrates the end of slavery in Texas. Now every American can learn, reflect on, and observe Juneteenth. Juneteenth becoming a state and federal holiday could not have been done without the advocacy and support of many of the people in this room, and especially some of the folks who lead Albina Vision Trust. I want to thank you all for all of your work, all of your support, and I hope to see you soon.
Now we'll do it from the beginning, I imagine.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Open Signal. Thanks, Chris.
Hello there. I'm sorry to miss the initial part of this event, but I'm hosting a town hall with my constituents right now online. I hope to join you soon. Today is an important day in our history, and we now have another reason to celebrate. Juneteenth has been established now as a federal holiday. In Oregon, we passed House Bill 2168, which makes Juneteenth a legal holiday here. HB 2168 recognizes that this important day in history is worth remembering and celebrating. Juneteenth is our country's second Independence Day, one that celebrates the end of slavery in Texas. And now every American can learn, reflect on, and observe Juneteenth. Juneteenth becoming a state and federal holiday could not have been done without the advocacy and support of many of the people in this room, and especially some of the folks who lead Albina Vision Trust. I want to thank you all for all of your work, all of your support, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. And then Cupid's going to get us started with our discussion.
Yes, thanks, Stephen. I'm excited about this. I wanted to be sure we remembered that in Galveston, Texas, it was 2 years after the enslaved individuals were free that they were notified of their freedom. That's the most insidious part of it, is that they were already free. They just didn't know that information was kept from them. So as we start talking about these questions, I've had the privilege of seeing many of these individuals in action. I'm going to ask them to be as transparent as legally possible. Bring the fire, because we were having a conversation about it. I've sat back with popcorn and been like, okay, here we go. So there's some things they know that they can say, be as open and transparent as possible, knowing the crowd, knowing that it's open. But the question that we want to start off with is this. You know, in Portland, we're known for bringing into being new ways of thinking about land use and transportation and innovation. And according to some, you know, we are the beginners of new urbanism. Now, could a similar revolution in thinking about cities, one that includes and acknowledges wrongs of the past because you can't fix what you can't face, and a new commitment in deeds as well as words to racial justice occur in one of the whitest cities in the United States? And I want to start this off with Ms. Rakaya, then we will go to our commissioner, then we will go to the congressman. So in that order, please start with that question.
Okay, Cupid. So give me the one sentence version of that, because that was a compound question. There's so many directions I could go with it.
So it's like, can we get it done here, y'all? Can we do what we need to do?
Friggin' absolutely. Here, let's just be one hundo about it. The first is we can do it. Everything we need to transform the urban form and to make Portland the visionary city that it was once for some people, but not everybody. Everything we need to do that is on this Zoom call right now. We got the capital, we got the political will, we got the people, we got the labor, right? We got the imagination, we got small businesses here. I see a lot of different folks who drive different parts of the solution here. Yes, we can do it. But what it will take is that it has to boil up from the people. It's not going to come down from our government leaders. It ain't going to come from ODOT. It ain't going to come from, from the top down. So what I think we really are struggling with is faith that our community, our ideas, that we haven't been so oppressed and beaten down that we've lost our capacity to imagine the beloved community, and then the power to execute on it. The thing that I think is changing, Cupid, that we hadn't had before, one, Commissioner Hardesty is in a pretty critical position. We have the alignment of political interests from the president down to the school board, right? Where we have the next school board leader who's in alignment with these visions. We have, like, the planets have aligned from a political perspective. We have capital that's ready to step in support of the community vision. We have folks who are skilled in labor and small business owners who are ready to step up into the contracts and execute. What we hadn't had was coordination and faith, right? And maybe to some degree, gravitas. Look, Black folks are the center of urban culture. It's time for us to be the center of urban power. It's time for us to be reflected in the urban form, not just in services, but in the naming of streets, in the recognition of monuments, in the design of our urban spaces for the safety of Black and brown children, in choosing the spectrum of light that illuminates brown skin at night rather than turning it dark brown, right? Blue light spectrum turns brown skin purple at night. Yellow light spectrum illuminates our faces. We're not involved in the decision about the spectrum of light that is on the street at night. So I think we can do it. We have to be bold. unapologetic. We have to take advantage of this first in a generation, maybe first in any generation alignment of power. So yes, I think we can do it.
Thank you for that. I mean, I'm going to give that a moment to breathe. Just give it a moment to just breathe, right?
I'm ready to go.
And now we got to transition over to Commissioner Hardesty. Same thing. How do we get it done? Can we get it done? Tell us the truth.
We have to get it. We can get it done if we tell the truth. The same thing about Portland is Portland loves to pat itself on the back about how inclusive, how progressive, how wonderful we are. And then you look at the data and you find out that we haven't moved the needle in 30 plus years. And that's only because we only started counting 30 plus years ago, right? The reality is that the city of Portland today has 14 failed programs that are supposed to provide opportunity for minority and women contractors. James Posey and I fought this battle 30 years ago, sitting in front of city council. And I can tell you today, we do worse today in making those opportunities available than we did 30 plus years ago when we started this battle. The difference is accountability. We do not have accountability built into our systems at all. We have people who provide really pretty reports, color-coded, to tell us how great we're doing. And the reality is we're not. And so unless we're transparent and honest and open, and here's the thing for me with what we're hearing about the Rose Quarter Project. Why can't Black people think differently? Why do all Black people in Portland have to have a monolithic one perspective of what's good for our community? We don't expect white communities to do that. We don't go to a white dude in Northwest and say, tell me what white people think and tell me how we can build policy around what that one white person thinks. But somehow it's acceptable in Portland and in Oregon to have a conversation with a Black person and then become an expert on what Black people think, right? So I think we have a lack of accountability from people who paint a very pretty picture to us, right? We don't hold them accountable. We elect people who say they're progressive, and then what do? We go home and kick back and maybe complain about what didn't happen. But the bottom line is we don't hold those folks accountable, and we don't vote them out when they don't actually do what they told us they were going to do, right? Accountability works both ways. And I got to tell you that some of the most amusing conversations at City Hall is trying to get a bureau to explain why their aspirational goals of 22% actually weren't met on a $4 million contract. And they want me to approve it with a 4% minority participation. I'm like, how does that even close? And why would I do that? And that's where we are, because people are comfortable and aspiring, but not actually holding people to the outcomes that we're supposed to have. And in 3 years, the amount of excuses I get for the lack of outcomes is just pretty criminal. And so people say I'm mean because I ask, well, how many Black people got contracts? How many Latinx people got contracts? How many Native American, in order to get to where we want to go? And if we want to get to a better future that we actually live up to who we think we are, we have to hold folks accountable for both what they say and what they do. And that's the challenge, because I'm not even asking people to be creative. I'm just trying to hold them accountable for what they say they're doing. And then because I don't know, I want accountability. Imagine that.
Yeah,
I'll stop there.
I so many spaces to just breathe, y'all. She is saying there is no leadership without accountability, number one. And if you show up to her, look, know your stuff, because you will get the truth. I can say that for sure. What she says in front of you, she will not say it behind your back. She's going to tell you right to your face how she feels. Look, I told you to eat your Wheaties this morning. This is this is what you should expect all day. Congressman, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. One of the elements, Rakaya, you were talking about the different in terms of skin tone and lighting. What we're talking about here, it literally is a matter of life and death. And I hope that there is a willingness to have a sense of urgency and dealing with specific things that we can deliver on. Poor people, people of color, children, and older citizens are much more likely to be killed on our roadways. This is a metric that we can hold all of us accountable. And having that sense of urgency that the curb cuts, the redesign, trying to have people obey traffic laws and not speed through our neighborhoods. These are things that I think there's a broad consensus. There isn't an awareness of the disparate impact in terms of our failure to follow through. Again, returning to the subject here about Albina vision and being able to look at this whole in the fabric of our community and think about what the possibility is. I mentioned that there are opportunities federally if we get our act together. I think that we're seeing initiatives with the city, the state. There was an effort to try and heal 82nd Avenue, which is kind of a scar on the other side of our community, kind of the dividing line between haves and have-nots in Multnomah County. And we're seeing at the state level, the city level, that there are some movement in a way that we've never seen in the time that I've been involved. The goal, I think, is to use problems to fashion solutions that solve problems rather than create new ones. The problems that we saw that put this scar on Albina was an effort at people dealing with problems, but created new ones. We want to make sure that we harness the forces of change to solve them. I think we have a greater awareness. We've got an interesting array of people who are a part of this effort, and more are paying attention all the time. And I think that is, if nothing else comes out of our conversation here today, is raise that awareness and inspire a sense of urgency to take advantage of the convergence of these forces on specific outcomes, like saving lives.
Thank
I
you.
agree with that. Hey, Cupid,
Yeah, go ahead.
keeping it real. Can
I was just going to jump into. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Hardesty, I know better than to open my mouth. If you have something to say, you should jump in.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Representative Blumenauer raised that great point. We are at a moment in time where we have a people of color caucus in the legislature. I want to shout out to Representative Con Pam, who actually led with other groups this effort around 82nd Avenue, right? It's a great example of what happens when you have good political representation, right? Because what happened was a coalition was built very quickly. As we've been trying to get 82nd turned over to the city forever, but we needed the state to actually pay for it to come up to code because it's so really poorly maintained at the moment. But it goes to show. So here we have a legislative effort with a legislative people of color caucus, with the people leading it who live in the neighborhood and understand how dangerous it is every single day and night to walk 82nd Avenue. We have me as the transportation commissioner, first African-American transportation commissioner who happens to live in East Portland and can talk really clearly about the pain and the experiences of pedestrians in East Portland. We also have ODOT in a position where they have major projects that are coming through the Portland metro area, and they need to be a better partner rather than the big state arm that comes in and dictates behavior, right? So all these political mechanisms lined up in a way that gave us the force to be able to make this move. I love overnight success that took 10, 15, 20 years to get to, right? Because the reality is it took a lot of work to have the right people in the right place at the right time to make that movement happen. It's not 100% yet until the legislature votes on the funding package. But again, without all these people in the right positions at the right time, this overnight success would not have happened.
I agree with that. And what appears to be overnight success is actually decades in the making, at least in the case of Lower Albina. For example, the generation of folks who can speak with authority about the financial, political, urban design issues in Lower Albina, we were educated at Harriet Tubman Middle School. Our Black souls were formed when Highland Elementary School became King Elementary School. Can you imagine what kind of love, self-love comes from Black children that go to King Elementary School, and then they learn about Black women and leaders at Tubman, and then go on to Jefferson High School. So the work that Ron Herndon was doing in 1979, that work in educating Black children is showing up in the political structure now. So none of this is short-term work, and the alignment of our political system is a result of decades of organizing by Black folks in Georgia, or South Carolina. So all of this seems to be fast because people are just paying attention. But I can say that for all of my life, I've been fed the food of love for our people and the work that it'll take to lift us all up. With that, I would also say, I don't want to let Portland off the hook on Lower Albina. ODOT and the federal government knew what they were doing when they placed I-5 through the historic Black community. There were a number of other options considered for that span of the freeway. It was placed there because those people were poor, they were Black, and they were powerless, period. Their homes were acquired by eminent domain, and we built a monument to modernity in the Coliseum. We destroyed the homes of Black veterans to build a monument to white veterans. So if we want, in order to move forward, we have to be honest about what's happening. In the city, we don't have Confederate monuments, but we have some in the form of worshiping leaders of that era, and we have a more distilled version of that in the placement of these massive transportation structures. The placement of the freeway is a form of white power monumenting. The disregard of those people who lived in that community and leaving it raised as parking lots for 50 years and empty fields, that's a form of monument. So the other piece of this that I think we have to be real honest about is that, sure, we don't have the data to hold people accountable, but we have it right before our eyes. So the question is whether or not we'll be honest with each other in recognizing these monuments to power that are intended to remind us of our place, right? So I want to keep it real here.
Yeah.
Like, we knew what we were doing, and the question is, will we be equally ambitious in undoing it? Will we be equally ambitious in showing love? And the city of Portland has done that before. The Japanese garden, where it is now, that used to be the zoo. We moved the zoo to build the Japanese garden after World War II, right? The cherry trees along the waterfront, that was a gesture of love that we made as an entire city, right? We have all these love letters we've written to each other in the urban form. I'm asking Portland directly, Black people need a love letter. We need it reflected in the urban form. And we think that happens in helping Albina to grow, because if Albina grows strong, so does 82nd and the folks living east of 82nd. We're barbelled. We're one community. So I'm going to get off my
No, this is exactly so. Stephen and I talked about this, and we have questions, but if it's flowing, we will not interrupt this. We won't ask everyone all the questions, but we are not going to stop. And just one more shout out. If we're looking at the chat, I'm loving the energy in the chat. Put your notes in there. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for our next question, I believe it's become, a lot of things are being called racial justice. We've got committees around it. It might be our 2021 Black Lives Matter sign. What does racial justice look like in urban planning, and how does it impact our existing resources? And what are some new resources that we would need to come to bear for racial justice to really play out from an urban planning perspective? Rakai, I'm going to ask you to lead us off with that question.
So if you overlay the arrival of Black and brown populations to Portland, the times when we significantly increased Black and immigrant populations in Portland, if you overlay that with the economic growth of the city, you'll see that Portland was a small town until the labor force, skilled labor force came here and accelerated growth, whether it was shipbuilding or the garment district or technical workers. The bottom line is people of color have been the accelerants in the economic growth of the city, but we haven't captured for ourselves, our families, and our communities the benefit of that. And the way it's reflected in the urban form, there are the buildings and then the communities that we live in, right? So in the built environment, there are a number of ways we could reflect us and our contributions to the city. There are naming conventions for streets and fountains and parks and schools. And I think we've begun to evaluate those naming conventions for schools, but we still have a lot of old Portland reflected in the other naming conventions in the city. So that's one option. The second option is that we don't erase the urban ethnic history. We enable those neighborhoods and communities to remain stable so that their food and flavor and style and grace is reflected in the neighborhoods of the city, not just a kind of whitewashed kind of hipster Portland, but that there are parts of the city that have distinctive urban ethnic cultures. We shouldn't wipe them all out with urban development. Number three, they're reflected in the people, not just the hardware of the city, but the software of the city. Commissioner Hardesty, I want to see her everywhere. She is a part of the software and the power structure that runs the city. We want to see us in the school boards. We want to see us in the city commission. We want to see us on the water boards. We want us to be involved in environmental remediation. So I'd say, in addition to the built environment, we want to be leaders in the built community as well. My final statement, and this is where my world is, you can have the built environment, the built community, and if capital is not in line with that, it can muck up a bunch of that. And that includes public capital, includes the money that ODOT is spending from bond issues and from the operating budgets of our government. So I think the other missing piece here is that capital needs to get in line with the built community. Our public capital, our private capital, our natural capital, our human capital, all forms of capital need to get in formation behind reflecting all of us in the urban form. So that would be my short answer. And if that's too abstract, I'm happy to talk more in detail about it later.
No, thank you. The naming conventions really hits home. There's a group of Black men that meet in Northwest Portland in the Pearl, and it's amazing to see how folks respond when they find out that the Pearl is the only neighborhood in Portland named after a Black woman. Right. And how they stick out their chest a little bit more, and they feel some ownership over the space. So I really that really hits home with me there.
Stephen, I mean, there's only one street in the city, as far as I know, named after a Black man, and I think that's Drexler Way. I mean, Dr. King Boulevard or King is one option, but local guy, I think it's just Drexler Way. Right. Do you know of any other?
No, I don't know. And there's a ton of opportunity there because we got a ton of greatness. So I want to move over to the congressman for his response on this question as well.
Fumbling here a little bit technically. Thanks, Stephen. I want to just elaborate for a moment on something Rakaya said, because I think the notion of not erasing the ethnic heritage, we scrubbed history when we dealt with Albina and those projects. One of the things I was pleased that we were able to do with some of the recovery package to help people get back on their feet was a program for restaurants that were really hit very hard. And we designed that program with guardrails so that the first $5 billion was dedicated to small restaurants. And then we had a priority for people who were first in line to apply for the grants, for veterans, for immigrants, for women, people of color. Now we had, I would argue, some racist file a lawsuit that held that up temporarily. But this was a way where we put our values into specific legislation, entirely justified based on the merits. And we were able to get billions of dollars where it needed to go. And I think that's part of what we should be doing moving forward, having specific investments that are reinforcing the protection of that ethnic heritage. The reference was made to 82nd Avenue and the Jade District and some of the folks out there working hard to be able to protect and enhance that diversity. We're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars that's going to be spent in this target area. And being able to identify specific elements of investment that will enhance and celebrate that ethnic diversity. Some of it will be in terms of the businesses that will be there. Some will be in terms of the businesses that will help part in to create it. But we have the capacity to be able to micro-target some of those resources. It was a complete failure of urban renewal to be able to take advantage of what was in that original legislation. They could have provided adequate money for the people who were there to, if they had to be displaced, they would have been able to have the resources to compensate them for it. And that money was never forthcoming. I hope we don't make that mistake going forward, using the tools that's there in the statute, there in terms of the project definition and our prioritization. I think there's a significant opportunity to be able, as I mentioned earlier, to solve problems, not create new ones.
So if I can jump in again, I see Rakaya was about to jump in again. Her and I I think we so think alike. I just want to remind us that, so what we have right now is we have a grassroots community that is sharing a vision of what's possible, right? What we have is local government that, and right now I am not sitting at the table with the Rose Quarter Project, even though as part of my job as commissioner in charge of PBOT, that is a seat that is open to me. And I was very intentional about not jumping into that seat on January 2nd when I was assigned to PBOT, because I knew that Albina Vision Trust had pulled out. I knew Commissioner Daly had pulled out. I knew County Commissioner Vega Peterson had pulled out. And I knew that there were massive issues with Tubman Middle School if any additional activity was going to take place. So my role was to make sure that I did my due diligence, talk to everybody, and look for a path back to the table, right? Because what I know is if you're not at the table, you're for lunch. And so I want to make sure that I am at the table before mealtime. Having said that, what I realize is that ODOT is doing an excellent job of trying to pit the Black community against each other. And it is playing out in the Rose Quarter Project in such an offensive way that I told the governor directly that what is playing out is the height of white supremacy. What you have is a state agency that is unaccustomed to being told what they must do to accommodate community commands. So what they're doing is actually pitting a Black contractor against a vision for the future. I want to be really clear. There is absolutely no reason why we cannot have a multi-million-dollar subcontractor on the Rose Quarter Project and have the Albina Vision Trust continue to move forward with their vision of the future. There's no reason not to have both. And why would we not have both? If you have to do the renovation, and there's no one who thinks the renovation is not necessary. If you've ever spent any time trying to get off the freeway ramp there, you know we need to fix it, right? But the question is, who decides what happens after the freeway improvement happens? Who gets to decide the future of that area? Is it community or is it ODOT, who was actually, I stepped into a meeting the other day where they're telling people they're going to be buying up land around where the development is happening, and then they're going to sell it afterwards. Well, no, they're not in the city of Portland, not as long as I'm involved in the Department of Transportation. That's not going to happen, right? And here we are with the best time ever at the federal level with a Federal Transportation Administration that knows that climate change is real and actually is desperate for proposals for the future. What does the future look like, right? And if we cannot collectively as Oregonians sell this vision at the federal level to where we're headed, right? How we're going to put clean technology in place. Why are we not thinking about how do we use electrification on 82nd Avenue? I've already said to TriMet, if you're not talking about electric buses on 82nd, you're wasting my time, right? We have to think about not what we've always done, but where are we moving towards? What does the future look like? I'm reminded when I started working on the Portland Clean Energy Fund, and people told me it was absolutely impossible to create a ballot measure that actually centered people of color, actually made them the beneficiaries of the resources that would be developed. I mean, I can't tell you how many certified smart people told me it couldn't happen. And guess what? Next year, $40 million will be leaving the city of Portland, being invested in programs to benefit Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color, right? So I tell you that story to say, if we don't have a vision of where we're headed, the status quo will work just fine, right? And I'm so supportive of the vision. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if it's the right vision, but what I know is we should do everything in our power to make sure that we are creating ample opportunity for that vision to be realized. And that's why I think it is so important that we force ODOT to be what they are supposed to be, a partner, right? Not a bully, not a dictator, but a partner, and actually undoing the harm that they've done in previous transportation projects and helping make sure that at the end of the day, when they leave, our community can decide what's next.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're actually, Commissioner Hardesty, we're going to keep the next question on you. You're hitting something. Some of the things that I'm hearing is that some of the tools we have were never intended for the outcomes we need right now. So we need new tools.
Right.
The question is this: when the last gas station closes, because everyone is moving around in electric vehicles, how will we pay for things? What does the future of land use transportation and racial justice look like? We're going to start with you, then we're going to go to the congressman, then we will go to Rakaya. But what does that look like?
Well, let me tell you, I am already working to identify alternative funding revenue sources for PBOT, because there's no way I can talk about mitigating climate change and actually have a bureau that is over reliant on fossil fuel and parking garage fees, right? So when I first got the portfolio, I was like, this can't work. This can't last, right? The good news is that we're having the same conversation at the federal level, right? We are looking at how do we implement possibly new mechanisms like congestion pricing, right? That is happening both at the state level, at the federal level. But here's my bottom line. My bottom line is any new funding mechanism, and if it's a state funding mechanism, the share must be split 50-50 between local municipalities, so the city of Portland and ODOT, and we have to make sure that low-income people are exempt from the beginning, right? No rebates, no tax credits, no. We have to set an income limit, and whether that's 150% of median family income, 200%, I don't care, but we have to set a limit, because what I know is that rebates never work for poor people. They never work for poor people, right? And if you're going to charge people who you pushed out to the edges of the city for the privilege of coming back into the city for their $2 to $3, $15 hour a day, an hour jobs, because you have to make $27 an hour in order to be able to afford to live in the city of Portland without being cost burden. So in answer to your question, any mechanism we put in place, it has to first go through a racial justice lens. It has to make sure it's not overburdening people of color and other low-income folks. And we have to make sure that those pieces are in place first. We can always tinker with it later. And I've said we need a 50-50 split, right? Because if the cities are going to be able to deal with the use of people diverting off freeways into side streets, we will have to actually be able to maintain those streets and create alternative multimodal transportation options. And I know that's happening at the federal level. Those conversations are happening. The gas tax is going away. And it's actually, it gets lower and lower, and it's going to continue to get lower and lower. And we have to find another mechanism. I have a $5 billion maintenance backlog. And you know that when you look at the streets in the city of Portland. So that's
Thank
my
you.
initial thoughts on
Thank
that.
you. Thank you for that, Commissioner. And just really quick, I want to put out there, we have about 15 more minutes Stephen and I will have, and then we'll have some closing remarks. I will hand it over to the Congressman.
Thank you. Well, there is work that is being done at the federal level to make the transition. We can no longer contribute financing our transportation system based on gallons of fuel consumed. Gallons of fossil fuel consumed is a recipe for downward spiral. And the longer we wait to change it, the more impact it has on lower income people. They tend to drive vehicles that are less fuel efficient. It's not gas sipping Priuses. It's often old beaters. And poor people have to drive. They have to get to work. I wish we had a better transit system, but there are a number of them, because of the way jobs are dispersed, they are dependent on their vehicle. It's going to take time to make the transition. It's going to take the better part of 10 years to get rid of that. Joanne's right, it's collecting less and less money overall, but the burden on low and moderate income people continues unabated. We can, in fact, design a system that has a way to cushion the effect. Checks are going out in 2 weeks to families with the earned income tax credit, and their families are getting checks in the mail starting in the middle of July. We can have a low income rebate for people to offset the costs of the road user charge. That is within our capacity. We're working to expand the pilot project that Oregon has undertaken to have more people around the country experiment with it. But the practical matter is that's 10 years before we can make it fully operational. In the meantime, we are fighting to have funding for transportation infrastructure with a couple of other mechanisms. Number one is help rich people pay their taxes. There's over $1 trillion that rich people fail to claim on their income tax. That goes a long way towards our being able to manage that. Changing the corporate income tax. We've got a variety of things to fund the federal contribution that do not have to add to income inequality, but rather help close those gaps.
Thank you, Congressman. And I know some of you might be hearing some of these processes and practices for the first time. Write the word down, look it up. They're so well versed. It sounds simple. It gets very intricate. I want to hand it over to Rakaya. I'm seeing in the chat a lot of talk about intermodal. I don't know if you want to address some of that, but floor is yours.
Yes, so I'd like to address 3 things. First, how important environmental issues are to Black populations and why the Albina vision is a direct conversation with that. 2, I want to acknowledge that Black folks living in Lower Albina was largely driven by labor force dynamics. And so this conversation about the Black contractors is really, really important. And 3, dealing directly with Commissioner Hardesty's call for accountability. So as we establish this big vision, one of the really important things that we will have to do is deliver on it, not just in the final product, but in its construction. So first, environmental issues. One way to solve the issue of folks having to drive far away between work and home is to create affordable homes in the central city, to create communities where our elders can live out their lives and not have to drive, that Black and brown elders can have the same experience that wealthy people in the Pearl have. So one of the outcomes of Albina Vision is that the folks who will reroute in that community won't need to be driving 30 minutes to get home, right? They can take the bus to work or they can bike to work. And we can have communities where we're supportive. So I want to be clear. One of the objectives of Albina Vision is to respond to the urgent need for environment changes in our behavior, living, and urban design, because we have to do that in order to respond to the climate crisis, period. The issues of environmental remediation, health, particulate in the air, pollution, those are Black issues. Our children have elevated levels of asthma. Our schools that were built to serve us are adjacent to freeways. Kids are unsafe walking streets that were not designed for people that are 3 feet tall. These are Black issues. They are not white people issues. So I want to make sure that we're clear about that. Black folks care about the environment. We want our communities designed to improve outcomes for the global environment. 2, one of the things I don't think we've been successful in articulating is that we're doing this work to generate opportunities for Black contractors. None of the people in the leadership team of the Albina Vision Trust can build massive civil projects. We want to generate work for our skilled labor force, because the Black folks who moved to Oregon originally were skilled laborers. My grandfather was a welder. He worked in the shipbuilding industry. There were technical people who worked on trains. My grandmother was a master sewer. She was a skilled laborer. And I think where we've not articulated the vision clear enough is to say, this is a labor force issue. We want people who working people, to be able to afford to live in the central city. That's important for our environment. It's important for our community. The third thing about accountability, Commissioner Hardesty, I'd like us to create a world-class system for hiring, growing, and promoting our skilled contractors. I want us to be held accountable for a level of excellence that has not been met in the state. And so in addition to having these grand visions for how we can live and how a freeway cap might happen, I want us to have grand visions about outcomes for our contractors and for wealth building in our community, not just owning the apartments or condos that are built in that community, but for building them as well. So I want to throw down the gauntlet and say, hey, let's talk about what an accountability framework looks like. We want to build it so it can be replicated around the country. So Black folks are environmentalists, hold us freaking accountable. And this is fundamentally a labor force opportunity to rebuild our community.
And let me just say, Lakaya, oh my gosh, so much knowledge and such a succinct package of information. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And you are absolutely right. It is, all of these issues are issues the African-American community deals with constantly. Let me just say how insidious how we actually identify minority contractors today is. I won't waste time on that today, except by saying it is fundamentally a racist system when the system depends on a certification system that everybody knows has only 20% of qualified businesses associated with it. And the only people who benefit from all the hoops that Black and brown people jump through to be state certified are white majority contractors. When the city of Portland consistently develops programs that are targeting to increase business opportunities for Black and brown people and women, and every single program, white men are the primary beneficiaries, white women are the second primary beneficiaries, and then it trickles down to everybody else. And every once in a while, a Black person accidentally gets a city contract. And I say that in jest, but it's absolutely true. The data supports what I'm saying. And let me just say that doesn't happen by accident. And when I ask the questions, people have mastered the art of the reasons why. Well, no, you can't find Black and brown people if you're only looking in a pool where 20% of them exist. Of course, you're not going to find them. Of course, if you've got a $4 million contract and you offer a Black subcontractor $10,000 of your $4 million contractor, who would be interested in that? I certainly wouldn't be. It's not worth the paper you want me to write it on, right? The fact that we have continued to elect people that refuse to hold people accountable for outcomes. I mean, I've asked, well, if you've got a $5 million contract and you've got $1 million that are being given out in subcontracts, you didn't find any people of color that actually weren't state certified that you could actually put into that $1 million pool. And the fact that no one even talks about it, that's why I ask how many Black people, how many brown people, how many Native Americans, how many women, right? Because if we don't ask those questions, then what we get is the alphabet soup that tells us we're doing a great job. Oh yeah, and in fact, that just happened to me last week. Somebody was patting themselves on the back, 45% MWESB participation. But then once you uncoupled it, it was white men. Somebody raise a hand. How many people think white men have a hard time getting contracts from the city of Portland, right? I don't. And the fact that they were patting themselves on the back for something that didn't exist is what we've allowed them to get away with since, right, for 30 plus years that I've been paying attention. And that's what Rikaya is talking about. How do we create those opportunities when the system is built to ensure that only white men benefit from those contracts? When I had people tell me, well, it's harder to recruit minority, no, it's not. I refuse to believe if they have a business license, right? They haven't been sued by anybody. Why are we not contracting with them? It's because we don't want to. It's because we have a system we're comfortable with. And if we're going to get to the vision of Albina vision, if we're going to get to the vision of equal opportunity for everybody, we have to be unafraid of asking these hard questions and holding people accountable to the outcomes. So I will leave you with this. I know that Representative Blumenauer needs Oregon to be unified in order for us to put pressure on his colleagues to give us the federal investments that we deserve. And so it is my hope that Governor Brown will work with us over the next couple of weeks so that we can clearly walk out of those meetings saying that we have a plan for moving forward the Rose Quarter project. I also sit on the I-5 Bridge project, which I am absolutely making sure that the same lens is being used to determine who benefits and who doesn't. And so, but that's what Representative Blumenauer needs from us. That's what the Transportation Administration needs from us. It needs Oregon speaking with one voice. And for me, the one voice is all of the above, right? We have the opportunity to undo systemic racial harm that we've done over generations. At the same time, reducing congestion and planning for the future that will be economically and it will be more equitable, it will be more just, and it will be more transparent. And we will see the benefits for the people who should be benefiting from these projects. That's a lot to get out in that short period of time that we had here, but.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And you're transitioning as well to kind of closing comments before we go into the workshop with Bruce. So this is how we're gonna do this. Cupid and I'll give kind of some of our takeaways, and then we'll go into the panelists, and then I'll introduce Bruce. Cupid, do you want to give us your quick takeaways real quick?
Yeah, I was taught not to, follow up the preachers with another preaching. So with that, I'm gonna just say, woo! I appreciate the knowledge. I appreciate the honesty. And the one thing that I want to mention is just the traumatic experience of those whose lived environment didn't deliver, but they were expected to invest in a system that needed them in order to shift the wealth. And what you're seeing is the intersectional breakdown of that, and it's traumatic. Some of those people are still alive. And I'm sad by it, but I'm heartened by these conversations. I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate the comments in the chat. We can't fix what we can't face. With that, I'm gonna hand it back over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Cupid. I've got 5 that I wrote down here. One, all Oregonians, especially these Black leaders here, owe a great debt of gratitude to Senator Gordley, who's with us. I can't imagine that we have the boldness and the positions that we have today without what she was doing yesterday. And that's loud and clear here. Second, contractors need to get the bag, period. And in all scenarios, they get the bag and the bag gets bigger over time, period. This is an opportunity for ODOT to prioritize Black contractors in Northeast, in Pendleton, in Burns, in Eugene, in Beaverton. All those contracts, those things work for us as well. To the Congressman's point, not doing right by Black Oregonians harms all Oregonians. This is not just a Black issue. We are robbing all of our neighbors and family and friends around the state. Fourth, we need to pivot from good intentions and thinking about fixing to thinking about doing something and getting ready to do something to actually impact and accountability. And then last, like, you know, and is a really powerful word, and you all used it really, really well. And we are so perfectly situated right now to use and in any way, certain form that we want as it pertains to this project. And so with that, I'll start with the Congressman. Do you have your final thoughts for us, sir?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to join with you in this conversation, and I deeply appreciate the work that has been done by the Albina Vision to help focus on some uncomfortable truths in our community. But I appreciate the fact that we have an opportunity now to refocus our efforts to heal that divide. We have an opportunity to deal with federal resources that are designed to put communities back together. The realization that it strengthens the entire community if we are able to build on that heritage and we're able to be inclusive. I think this is an opportunity that's unparalleled in anything that I have seen. The stars are aligning in terms of the awareness, the force of the community working on the Albina Vision, getting the attention of a variety of people who are in decision-making capacities. And as I mentioned, we've got a federal administration that is committed to putting resources in the communities that have figured out how they want to pull pieces together. I look forward to working with all of you as we move this forward so that we have an aggressive request of our regional leaders and the federal government to be able to take advantage of it, because Portland and Oregon will be the better, and we can perhaps have a model of livability that is one of inclusion and curing serious historic mistakes. That could be a model that others could emulate. But in the meantime, I just want us to get it right.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Hardesty, please.
First, I just want to thank Albina Vision Trust just for having this event today at this most auspicious day for Juneteenth. I also want to really appreciate the hard work of Albina Vision Trust, because again, what you are, the goal that you have laid out is a vision that we can all imagine, right? What's unique about this moment that we're in is that the political, the community, and the sites are all in alignment at the same time. I will encourage each of us, please don't let folks distract us, right? There is no right or wrong project. There is no right or wrong vision. This is really about how do we make sure that what we move forward gives us the very best opportunity for what we want to see in the future. If we blow the opportunity to actually even have the caps so that we can imagine what could go on the caps, then once again, another generational development is delayed, right? There is a sense of urgency, because what we know is that if we don't move now, it will be another generation before we have an opportunity like this again. And I am grateful for Representative Blumenauer and his consistent push around multimodal transportation options. And as the Transportation Commissioner, it is my strong desire to make sure that we are building a more climate resilient transportation system for our future. And my last point will be The other thing that we have to do at the federal level, though, is we have to work to make sure that just like we're making changes in contracting at the city, these big federal contracts that are coming down that only require each merging small businesses is another legacy of white supremacy policy that only benefits white men. We must change that at the federal level so that there's more opportunity as well in those federal contracts coming down the pipe for minority-owned businesses. And so we got a lot of work to do, but the good news is at the community level, at the elected level, we have a lot of the right people in the right place to make these things happen. So have a great day, and thanks again for this fabulous conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I see we have one of my mentors since I was a little kid, Senator Lou Frederick, joining us. He's doing work in the community. We could tell a lot of stories about little Stephen, but this isn't the moment for that. Lou, we are going through our final thoughts on what this project means. And I'd love to hear from you, your thought about the Albina vision, Juneteenth, being a, almost half-century resident of Albina. What does all this mean to you right now?
Well, let me start off with Juneteenth. I think that, and I think it connects. What we're seeing is finally the people being at the table to say what we need to see happen. This is, as one person put it a while ago, if you're not at the table, you're the appetizer. We're no longer allowing that to take place. And Juneteenth is part of what we're seeing as the legacy of the changes regarding Juneteenth. And the legacy of the changes of the last year, certainly, is that people are saying, no, you're going to listen to us. You're going to hear what we have to say. We need to be part of this discussion. We have many of the same, all of the same basic needs of health, of access to transportation, of economic security, of all of these things are part of our community. So how do we do this well and make sure that we're part of the discussion? That's what I'm seeing. And as we look at the Albina vision, I am very pleased with the ideas that have been set up there. I have lived in my house since 1977, and I'm sort of a bit of a historian. I enjoy the history of this area, and I've enjoyed that for quite some time. So watching the changes, watching the people step forward and say, no, we're going to really be involved in this. You're not going to just pat us on the head and say we're involved. We're going to really be involved in this. If you go back, and I did, when I was a reporter, I counted, there are at least four different Albina approaches, Albina reports and projects and plans that go back to 1977 that I know of, that have been placed forward and have only marginally been accomplished. I think probably
a spacious Turbo summer home.
Hello, the classic image of that for me. Somebody just put up something regarding the Albina special that I did back in 1980. But the classic for me is looking at the lot that sits there between Williams and Vancouver on Russell, that has been empty since I think 1962 at this particular point. And it was an economic basis for the Black community at that time. So we've had these kinds of promises and requests, and we're basically not requesting anymore. We're saying, no, you will do this now. We will do this, and it will be a part of how we get it done quickly, but we will be a part of the contracting. We will be part of all of these aspects of this particular project because it is part of our community, and we're going to make sure that the people are listening to us now. And we got some, I enjoyed the letter that came in from the congressional delegation. I'm pleased to see that. But I also, I've got to make the point as well that we are also saying we're part of the state. We are not just, it's not just Portland. It is part of the state, and we have to be, we have to acknowledge that and understand how that fits in. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of this particular system, this particular plan, this project itself. I want to see us set up a system that is going to be effective for as the whole community, and that's the kind of thing that I'm looking at. And that community includes the state. It includes the incredible commercial uses that I-5 takes with trucks coming through north and south, coming from California and coming from Vancouver, BC, and how we incorporate that into a system that allows us to have the caps, the lids, whatever. And I want to make it also very clear, when I'm talking about lids and caps, I'm not talking about a bike trail over the area. This has got to be a significant, substantial system so that people can use it for a number of things. I'd love to see, if possible, housing, but certainly we should see businesses and other things on those caps. So I'm not talking about it being a nice, quick, light kind of thing taking place. I'm really talking about it really being something that is substantial, that really reconnects the river to the Lloyd Center, reconnects the Elliott neighborhood to the river. All of those things are important to me. So that's what I'm looking at.
Awesome. Thank you, Senator Frederick. Thank you, Rakaya, for bringing up Lou's segment that he did for KTW back in 1980. I put the links in the chat for both the one he did in 1980 and another one that KTW did in 1967. Seeing Lou walk around inner Northeast with Ronnie Herndon talking about the very same things that we are talking about today gives me goosebumps, right? And so this seems like a really quick thing, but as we talked about earlier, this has been decades in the making and layers upon layers of work that continues to play out. And when you see those kind of things, it doesn't help but embolden you even more. You were about to say something, Senator?
Well, I was just going to say, I talked with Ronnie Herndon about a couple of weeks ago and mentioned that I was still upset with him because he still looks skinny and I don't. I don't know, that 1980 thing. But we were talking about changes then. We were talking about understanding the community and the economic and the education and the housing issues then. And we're still talking about these things in ways that we could have gotten some of these things solved. So I hope that I'm able to help get some solutions involved in this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then last but not least from our panelists, I'm going to go with the Queen of Woodlawn, Miss Kai Adams.
Stephen, you probably don't know this, but there was once in the history of the Portland Rose Festival, a Black Rose Festival court. And I was on that court, which is a little funny. Only once in the history of the Rose Festival.
Zero surprise there.
I'm not going to add to the technical conversation here, but take us up a few thousand feet. The word Albina means bright light in Latin. Right now, our country is struggling to see the way forward. The city is struggling to see the way forward. We've made efforts to reopen and win the reopening based on our commercial center, and it doesn't feel quite right. We continue to try to figure out how we can grow without harming the environment. We are searching, we are looking for the light. What this opportunity gives us is a chance to speak openly about pain for white folks to approach living together in a different way, for Black folks to approach power in a different way. It's a way, this is our chance for the city to come together on a project so monumental and large that it will take all hands. We'll have to take our hands from around each other's necks and get to work. All of us are struggling to find the light. I will say again, Albina is bright light. Let's step into it.
Woo, woo, that's something. Woo, okay, I'm ready to go today. I'm ready to go. So as we transition, I want to again thank and applaud all the panelists for all of your time, your wisdom, your insights. keeping it 100, as Rakaya said, which is the only way I know you all know how to roll anyway. And with that, we're going to transition to the next piece of this, the letter writing workshop with Bruce Poinsett. Bruce, welcome, sir. Tell us what we're doing next.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to the Albina Vision Trust for having me today. So first, before we get started, just want to direct people to a little piece of housekeeping. You may have seen Jana's comment earlier, but I just want to redirect people to it. It's if you want to register your voice about what the I-5 highway coverage solution should look like, go to the Independent Cover Assessment's website at www.albinahighwaycovers.com and take the survey. It ends tomorrow, June 20th at midnight. And just another note that AVT supports the options that allow for the most restored land and opportunity. So again, want to make your voice heard on that, please do. So today, let me pull up my screen here. Okay, yeah. So we're going to be doing a letter writing workshop today to basically push this work forward. Specifically, we're going to be writing a letter to Governor Brown about supporting the work of Albina Vision Trust and supporting the work of centering racial justice in these development policies and in these, as we talked about earlier, hundreds of millions of dollars of public investment. Poinsett, I he, him, his pronouns, the host of the Blacktastic Adventure, also a freelance writer, editor. You can look at all the, little credits there. And what we're going to be talking about today with writing, specifically writing as a tool for visioning. And this has been really central to my work as a writer who got to start doing, columns back for the town newspaper back in high school. And I grew up in Lake Oswego, which a lot of you know is Lake No Negro, Oregon, and it's earned that reputation. But writing for me has been a tool to do some of this work as far as trying to create a different reality and trying to start giving people a picture of a different reality and pushing for a different reality. And that's basically what visioning is. So according to the Oxford Dictionary, visioning is the development of a plan, goal, or vision for the future. As effectively what we're doing today with Albina Vision Trust and with these I-5 Rose Quarter projects. So before we get into the letter specifically though, one thing that I found is really helpful for getting people writing is just the practice of free writing. For those who have not, heard of what free writing is basically just, it's kind of like a warm-up exercise to get you thinking, to get you, get your pen working a little bit. And right now, what we want to do with this free writing is we just heard this great panel, a bunch of insights, a bunch of, again, visions for how we can do this work better. And I want you to really think about things you heard. Think about, certain comments, whether it's sayings, whether it's, certain like historical references to certain places, to policies that stuck with you. And go here for some more specific instructions. But basically, I want you to take wherever you're taking notes. It can be on the computer, it could be in a notepad, it could be on little sticky notes like this. And I just want you to take like 5 minutes and reflect on the panel. Like, what were your initial thoughts and feelings about what you just heard? What are some specific stories, places, or policies that were brought up that stuck with you and why? And I want you, again, just take about 5 minutes to reflect on this and make sure to keep these notes because we'll need them for the letters we're going to be crafting at the end of this workshop. So we'll start 11:40 now. So we'll give you 5 minutes. So we'll come back at 11:45 and then get to the letter portion of this workshop. And I'm not sure if Albina Vision Trust has music in the background, but we can do this in silence.
Yeah, we just a little bit wary of a copyright because we're streaming on YouTube. That's all.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. So a little bit of a silent meditation while you write, and yeah, we'll be back at 11:45. Okay, take another 30 seconds or so to wrap up any final thoughts. Again, these are really more so, it's an activity to get you, again, just get your writing muscles working. And then, really these are notes for the letter we will be composing. We will all be composing. Okay, so now for the main portion of our activity, and I have a guest I'll be introducing shortly. We'll be adding some insights to this, but the big point of today is that we want, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in public investment. And part of that is using this writing to, express to Kate Brown, not just, the importance of it, but why it should be a state priority and why it's important to you. So what we're going to be doing for that is be writing a letter just to Governor Brown about why making racial justice a fundamental part of the Rose Quarter development plans is important to you. And we have a link here, which I also will put in the chat, where you can send, these letters once they're done to Governor Brown. But first, a few prompts to think about while you're writing. And again, we will be going through, we'll have a guest going through an example so you can kind of see what this looks like in practice. But just again, 4 prompts. 1, Albina Vision Trust needs to make sure that the millions of public investment that will go into I-5 Rose Quarter projects will deliver transformative commitments to racial justice. Why is supporting this work important to you, and why should it be a state priority? And I will also put these prompts in the chat as well. 2, what would it look like if the I-5 Rose Quarter projects and our state's economic development priorities included acknowledgements and action to remedy past wrongs in Portland and Oregon? What might that world look like? What would you like to see? Describe what a future neighborhood intentionally designed to reflect love for Black people might look like. What do you see as your role in making that happen? What would you like to see the governor and other elected officials do? And finally, what are some examples from the past and or present in Portland and Oregon that have affected you and your family? How does that influence the work you are engaged in or would like to see happen? Again, I will put these in the chat, as well as the link to email the governor. And I'd now like to introduce our guest, Marshall, who will be going through a sample of what one of these letters might look like. And I guess I will stop sharing and we'll look into that and then get into writing time.
Thank you, Bruce. And I think I got this job because I've answered thousands of letters in elected officials' offices. My first ever job in politics was running the auto pen machine in a US Senator's office. So I've literally read thousands and thousands of letters directed to different elected officials. So I can just say 2 things off the top and then just read you my letter, which is not perfect, but that's maybe the 3rd point, is it doesn't have to be perfect. The 2 points I make is we have a pretty sophisticated audience here today, and I think often we feel like others will speak up for us. My point is that something is infinitely better than nothing. So even writing a couple of lines will make a difference. And that hearing directly from you, even if you're involved in different capacities, a individual message makes an incredible difference. And the second big point I make is that it's not some fancy rhetoric or being able to say exactly the right thing. Your story is the most powerful thing that any elected official will ever hear, because no one can tell your story. Lots of people can invent fancy rhetoric, but not anybody else on the planet can tell your story. So I'm gonna just read my letter quickly, and then I'll put a copy of it up in the chat. So mine goes, Dear Governor Brown, I'm writing to convey my support for Albina Vision's plan for the future of the Albina neighborhood. The I-5 Rose Quarter project presents an opportunity to correct past injustices. Now is not the time to double down on past mistakes. It's time to try to correct them. Oregon has been a leader in the fields of land use and transportation policy. We famously stopped building a highway through Southeast Portland in favor of building the first light rail system in the country in generations. That decision reshaped our state for the better. Now we can make the same kind of difference by literally making a place to build a new neighborhood while we invest hundreds of millions of dollars into a highway. I moved to Albina in 1995. Many of my friends told me that I was moving into a dangerous neighborhood, but my experience was different. I loved living in an economically and ethnically diverse neighborhood. While I have benefited economically from the rapid appreciation of real estate in the neighborhood because I own my home, I'm unhappy that my kid is growing up in a more homogeneous environment. One of my first neighbors in Albina, former community leader Harold Williams, used to say that you could tell a healthy neighborhood because there would be elders on their porches while kids played. I agreed then and understand his wisdom now more than ever. We all share responsibility for the societal forces that damaged the historically Black neighborhoods that made up Albina, and then rapidly gentrified them while displacing thousands of families. It's not possible to turn back the clock and undo the results of the last few decades, but we can make better choices for our future. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any good examples of how other cities and states have managed to do that. But that means that Oregon has an opportunity to lead the country again in developing new ways to bring our values into being. We do have one crucial ingredient for making this change, Albina Vision. Like the activists who came together to stop the Mount Hood Freeway project, Albina Vision is helping our community imagine a whole new neighborhood with plenty of places for elders to watch kids play. Please use your power as the leader of our state to direct the I-5 Rose Quarter project to include plans to rebuild and reconnect the neighborhood that the highway damaged when it was built. Thank you, Marshall. So that's the end of my letter contribution for the day. I kind of think of it as my contribution to for the privilege of being able to be part of this conversation today. The other thing that I would encourage everybody to do, in addition to writing a letter, and this is something that I'm going to start doing right now today, is to start making a recurring $10 a month contribution to Albina Vision. There's a few other causes that I do that for. I know I can afford it, and I know that it will help Albina Vision carry this work forward. So thank you to everybody for being here today, and it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to play a part in it. Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Marshall. And yeah, I just want to reiterate a couple points from that. Again, sometimes we get caught up and we get hung up on wanting to say the perfect thing. Like Marshall said, saying something and making sure your voice is heard is better than silence. And, sometimes, again, it's about getting your voice out there and getting your voice to the governor, making sure the main points as far as saying you want to see this public investment going into work that, or going into projects that center racial justice, that acknowledge and put action towards remedying past wrongs. And like I said, making it, personalizing it, that is what will make these the strongest. Don't think you have to be some policy wonk. Like, your your voice as a citizen is very strong. So right now, I think we're gonna put the rest of the time to writing. I'm gonna put the prompts back on the screen. And if there's any other direction from the organizers, I will turn that over to them.
You're muted, Winter.
Geez, how embarrassing. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I was saying, everyone, as you write your letters, if you CC Albina Vision, I'll drop our email in the chat here. It's just info@albinavision.org. Then we can use your communication on our website and in other ways as well. So if you give us permission to do that, then please CC us. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. Bruce, your time and expertise and leadership in this letter writing workshop has been phenomenal. I know folks are still writing, still in thought, but before we close out and before folks depart, we have scheduled to go until 1, but our program has concluded, except for a little closeout that I'll do, and a thank you to folks. And so as we're going, we're gonna let Bruce offer some last thoughts. So Bruce, when you're ready, please feel free to round us out and then pass it on over to me, and I will close things out.
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. I just would like to, as far as final thoughts, I think, again, it's a hard act to follow from the panel before, but I just want to reiterate that, this is necessary work, and it's important not to accept this idea that, one thing, you have to make these choices that harm us. Like a big theme throughout the discussion earlier was, this idea of yes and we can do these development projects, make sure Black contractors are taken care of and are able to thrive, and make sure the community is able to thrive, and make sure we acknowledge and remedy history. All of these things can be done. We're talking, again, hundreds of millions of dollars. Other communities are not, I shouldn't say all other communities, but, like white communities are not forced to make this decision about, we're going to acknowledge history or we're going to screw you all over. No. So this work is important, it's comprehensive. Things, again, I came here to share a little bit about letter writing, and it's not always the sexiest part of this work, but all these little things that make this infrastructure successful, they're necessary, they're important, they're powerful. So how you can contribute, whether it's letter writing, advocating, organizing, et cetera, get involved, because this is a big movement to, again, create a better reality for future generations. So I just want to thank Albina Vision Trust again for inviting me to present, and look forward to continuing to build with you all.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Your work in this writing piece specifically, I think is huge. And I'd seen somebody in the comments earlier talk about the significance, I think it was you, Mohammed, talking about the significance of shifting consciousness. And that's happening at a federal level, that's happening at a national level. And we're really seeing that here in Portland and in Oregon. And these letters are nuggets and seeds of the consciousness from members all across the community, Black community members, white community members, mixed race, biracial, Latinx, Native American, Asian Pacific Islanders, East Asian, all of those members that make up this community have energy and have thought to contribute. And all of that goes to shift the consciousness towards a more just and a more equitable community for everybody. And if you look at history, one thing that, if you look at history, the Black community has been leading in creating a more equitable and more civil and more just society for all. This is not to be built just so Black folks can keep people out, because that is nowhere near our mission whatsoever. It's solidarity, it's unity, it's collaboration, it's partnership. And so this work that Bruce has led us in, this work that Marshall has led us in, this work that Winter Johannes has led us in, that Rakaya Adams, Stephen Green, Anilea Halova, or Congressman Earl Blumenauer, Senator Luke Frederick, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, Cupid Alexander, and all the folks who have made this work that much more of a reality. And last but certainly not least, Mother Avel Gordley. I personally haven't had a chance to meet her. I am a native of Portland. I've been born and raised here. Spent all of my life in Northeast Portland in the historic Irvington neighborhood, which is a part of the historic Albina neighborhood. To be in a space as a young Black man in Portland with these leaders at the helm, who are themselves reminiscing on the shoulders of the giants they stand on, is life-changing. There are almost no words for it. And I want us to sit with that today in this room, not only are we celebrating Juneteenth, but we've also created spaces for the continuation of the catalyst and the hard work that so many of the great giants, both named and unnamed, have done. They've created space, they've created opportunity for people like myself, people like Bruce, who I've gone to church with and I've been raised with, people like his parents who've done countless hours of work and shed countless amounts of blood, sweat, and tears so that young boys, young girls can go to school in safe places, can go and worship in places where they feel safe, where they can take public transportation to and from school, to their jobs, and know that they're going to be welcomed with warm arms when each of the community members that they walk by when they go home wave and say hello. And if they have done something wrong, then they're going to get a whooping and know about it. They know that that's going to be all in the name of love. And that's what a community is. And so we cannot take for granted the opportunity that we are facing as a community. And I think we should also, and most importantly, sit with the significance of how this work is going to shape the next generation. I hope the children that I have will be able to sit in a space talking about the next step that needs to be taken to bend this long arc of justice. And it is a complete honor to be here. And again, thank you to the staff of ABT. And there are 3 points I just want to leave everybody with that are more housekeeping. So thank you to the ABT staff, volunteers, board, and all those who supported ABT in this work. That's Marshall, Keane, Talton Davis, Cleo Davis, Len Bergstein, Marshall Runkle, Judy in the ABT office, and Winta Johannes. Your work is seen and valued. And the 3 pieces of housekeeping I'll leave us with. Please feel free to, if you have not yet, take the highway survey, highway cover survey. That link will be dropped into the chat momentarily. The second piece is complete and submit your letter to the governor to info@albinavisiontrust.org. And then thirdly, you have the opportunity, and we ask you all to become a $10 sustaining member, $10 a month sustaining member with Albina Vision Trust. You can find all of our information online at www.albinavision.org, and I'll drop that into the chat as well. And this is going to give you all an opportunity to support the mission in more ways than one. And with that, I ask you all to close out in reflection and in good spirits and with high hopes that this vision that Albina Vision Trust and the many stewards of this community have been working decades to craft comes to materialization, comes to fruition, and truly creates a space to replace Albina, the Albina district, as a pillar of the Black community here in Portland. Thank you.
Right, thank you, everyone. So as Alexander drops those links in the chat for what he's referenced, I want to remind you that we will continue this Juneteenth party. We're hosting a drive-in movie night near the Memorial Coliseum. The Eventbrite is in the chat. The first screening is sold out, but there are still tickets for the second screening. There will also be a projection on the Portland Public Schools headquarters site. So hopefully we'll be able to see you in Lower Albina tonight. Thank you, everyone. Bye.